Jets fans, how are we doing tonight? Today, what time is it when you're listening? Inconsequential. You have shown up to episode 60. Way! Episode 60 of Greenbean's Jets Pod. 60 straight episodes. You've been here the whole time, and I thank you for that. I'm incredibly grateful. If this is your first time here, welcome. Welcome to episode 50. And that's how quick it happens. Welcome to episode 60. Newcomers, I am grateful that you are here as well. It's a good time, man. It's a good time. We try to get right down to brass tacks here. Try to cut through a lot of the balagna that you see out there. You hear from this guy or that guy or this one saying this, and the rumor came down here. Robbie Anderson wants to come back and be the Jets wide receiver, even though he just signed an extension for 2 years with the Carolina Panthers. We're supposed to believe this stuff. Greenbean's Jets Pod makes every attempt to slice through that cheese and get you down to what's important and what's potentially real. And that's what we're doing here. So welcome. Hello, audio guys. I don't know why I waved. I waved to you guys in the car. I don't know why I waved. I know you can't see me, but hello to you guys that are listening in audio format. I am also grateful for you. And let me tell you something, audio guys. If you have a second, it really does help if you rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any of these podcast platforms that we're on. Go ahead and give it a 5-star rating and then maybe even say a thing or two about it. It's greatly appreciated, and I am thankful. So guys, here we are. You know where I am today? I'm in my RV again. Yes, I know that was the simplest answer. But I am in a place called Silver City, New Mexico. On our way here, we got to hang out at White Sands National Park. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it or have ever been there. It was one of the most magically delicious places I've seen on this whole entire road trip that we've been on for the last almost 2 years. In another month, it'll be 2 years that I've been on the road talking Jets with you guys. But man, White Sands National Park, what an amazing place. We got to sleigh ride down these amazing white sand dunes made of gypsum and silicate. I sent the videos to a few friends. Everybody thought it was snow. Isn't that crazy? They thought it was snow. They can't believe that it was sand. Now we're at Silver City, so I hope to be able to connect with the energy of this place and bring you the finest Jets content I can muster. I can only muster so much, my friends. So here I am. Welcome to Greenbean's Jets Pod. If you have the opportunity, go ahead and hit like and maybe even subscribe. To you newcomers, if you subscribe and hit that bell, you'll be reminded every time we go live or any new content is released. I release probably anywhere from 3 to 5 videos a week. Every Monday morning, I release the Jets Pod. And we have 2 live streams every week as well. The Monday night 10 o'clock mock, 10 o'clock. And then we do the Thursday thick of it. Every Thursday at 8 p.m. we have awesome guests. I have co-hosts. Frankie from Flatbush helps me co-host the Thursday thick of it. It's a great time. And you guys will be made aware whenever that happens so you can check it out. How's that sound? Well, for today's podcast, we are not going to get into the intelligent gripe or the moment of the week or the reality score or any of that stuff. We are now officially in the NFL offseason, and we are going to talk about the first wave of things that happens for us. Right now, it's rumors and talk and smokescreen and ideas. That's what we're talking about right now. But the truth is the Jets can't do much. Yes, I believe we can sign our own players, and I'd like to see some of that happen. But we can't really do much until March 16th, which is 2 weeks after the Combine. So there's a lot of stuff coming down the pike. But March 16th is the day that we can start talking free agency, when the Jets can actually get some things done. And then after that, we go to the draft at the end of April. So we're going to talk about free agency today. I'm going to give you my best case scenario for the Jets in free agency. And then we'll even talk a little bit about what that would mean for the draft. So, look, we can do mock drafts, and we do. We can talk about the prospects that we like, and we do. But the truth of the matter is that we don't really know who our priorities in the draft are going to be until we get through the free agent period. Which free agents do we sign of our own? What other guys are we really going to be able to bring in? Who wants to come to the Jets? Who wants to stay with the Jets? Who can't wait to get the hell out of here? Who looks at the Jets and says, no, thank you? So we got to know all that. We have to know all that and be able to navigate through those waters before we land on the dry island of the NFL draft, where there is fruit aplenty, right? That's what the draft is to me. It's the island where coconuts and mangoes and papayas and bananas are all over the place. But first we gotta get through those troubled waters of free agency. And that's what we're going to do here today. I'm going to give you my best case scenario in NFL free agency. How's that sound? And then you guys will be able to tell me how much you hate it, how much you love it, and what you might have done differently, who you think it's crazy to even entertain. But guys, I want you to know there is a way that we can do this. Now, every year we talk about free agency and we talk about the draft, and most years we're off. We're off on free agency. Why is it that we've been so off on what we thought the Jets were going to do in free agency the past few years? Well, interestingly, for a while, the Jets fan base was able to predict with some accuracy the free agents that we were going to bring in, whether it was Le'Veon Bell, whether it was, all the guys that we'd brought in over the years. We knew we were going to get Brino Giacomini and on and on and on. There's always guys that Jets fans were able to put a finger on, and then it would happen. Well, number one, we have an organization led by Mr. Joe Douglas that is a lot tighter than usual. In years past, the Jets beat and some other reporters, maybe the Rappaports, the Schefters, the Glazers of the world, they were able to get some really accurate, deep intel on the New York Jets. So they would hear something, they would say, I'm hearing this or that, and then it would come true because the source that they had was actually in the room. These guys were telling stories, selling their info to whoever, and they were able to tell us beforehand who it is that the Jets were going to get, and it would be relatively accurate. Since Joe Douglas has been here, we haven't seen that at all. The truth is, Joe Douglas actually uprooted a couple of scouts that were known as leaks. His first year here, he identified who they were and said, get out. We don't want people knowing what we're going to do. Like, look at last year alone. Last year, the Jets beat was talking about guys like Galladay. They were talking about guys like Juju Smith-Schuster. They were talking about us trading Sam Darnold maybe to the 49ers. None of that happened. There were guys telling us that the Jets were going to be in on Joe Thuney. We were talking about maybe Corey Linsley. All sorts of characters. Not one guy that anybody mentioned was a guy that ended up being a free agent signing from the New York Jets. So we heard about all kinds of stuff, and nothing has come to pass because Joe Douglas's regime is airtight. He has guys around him that he trusts without question. Guys like Phil Savage, long history with Phil Savage. Guys like Chad Alexander, long history with Chad Alexander. And on and on and on. And everybody within the organization knows this is what is expected of me here, and they're not leaking. The only guy that we heard anything with any accuracy was Morgan Moses after the main free agent period. And that was because Morgan Moses was literally on a tour. He was like the only free agent left in many respects. And he was on a tour. He visited the Jets, and the Jets knew. So the other thing is that Joe Douglas is not adhering to the business as usual New York Jets manner in which they collect talent, which has been what? We have a lot of cap space. We need to go spend a lot of cap space on who? Whoever's going to sell tickets for this terrible franchise. That's who it is. Get the biggest names we can, bring them in here because our draft picks are complete failures. We can get no one outside of maybe the first round sometimes. And so the rest of our picks don't make it, and we have to supplement and really build the core, the foundation through free agency. So it was exciting for Jets fans. We got to watch all these names and potentially high caliber players come in, but it never works out. And Joe Douglas has decided we're not doing it that way. We're going to slow this down. Quite the opposite. In fact, we're going to sell off all these assets that we've paid for or high draft picks or whatever. We're going to start this one over from the studs, and we're going to go out there and spend frugally while I build through the draft. But this year, I have a sneaking suspicion that this year is going to be different. Why? Well, because this is the first year that Joe Douglas has his hand-picked coaching staff and his hand-picked quarterback, which, as we know, that 5-year quarterback rookie contract window, it's ticking. It's ticking. It's going. So at some point, you're going to have to do everything you can, utilize all your resources to make the best possible swing, the best possible attempt at winning during that 5-year period. So it's his third offseason, but in truth, it's really his second offseason without having an equal partner in the decision-making process. As we know, Adam Gase had that privilege before. So in my opinion, this is going to be a year where we see Joe Douglas act a little bit more aggressively in free agency. Now, the Jets have about $54 million in cap space as it stands right now. Now, if you guys remember, I did an offseason master plan version 1.0 a few weeks back. I'm going to keep the same exact cuts and free agent signings from our own team that I used in that video to get us to what I think is going to be the most beneficial way to handle free agency for the New York Jets this season. So let's go over that very quickly. So we have $54.3 million in cap space. We're going to cut guys like Greg Van Roten, Blake Cashman, Ty Johnson, Ryan Griffin, Javin White, Zane Lewis, Kai Nakua, Rashad Wildgoose, and Del'Shawn Phillips. And we're even going to cut LaMichael Pirine and Austin Walter. That would give us a total of $14.4 million in cap savings, which leads us with $69.6 million. Now, that's $70 million where I come from. I don't know about you. That's 70 mil. So we have $70 million going into free agency after we make these cuts. Now, guys like Ryan Griffin and Greg Van Roten, in truth, while they could maybe be depth pieces and all that kind of stuff, it's more beneficial to lose. Both of them cost over $3 million next year. So it's more beneficial to gain that almost $7 million from cutting those two guys than it is to keep them. Whatever benefit they can add is outweighed by that contract situation. So we're going to go ahead and start free agency with just under $70 million. And we're going to go ahead and start with our own guys. Here's who we're going to re-sign in free agency. We're going to sign Braxton Berrios for $6 million. We're going to give Tevin Coleman somewhere between $1 and $2 million. We're going to re-sign this kicker that we found off the scrap heap last year, Eddie Pinheiro. We're going to give him about $1.5, maybe $2 million. We're going to keep Mike White for $1 million. We're going to re-sign LDT for that team-friendly deal he's talking about. We're going to give him anywhere from $3 to $4 million for 2 years. LDT staying around is very important to my plan. Nick Bawden, the fullback, we're going to keep him for $800,000. We'll re-sign defensive end Tim Ward for $750,000. Kyle Phillips, the defensive tackle, for $895,000. We're going to re-sign safety Elijah Riley for $780,000, which leaves us with $50 million. So we spent just under $17 million keeping our own guys around, which I think is important. Now, look, it can go one way or the other, this guy or that guy, but that's about what we're going to be spending. So that leaves us with just under $50 million to go into the external free agent period. Not too shabbaroon. We already have our guys and we still have $50 million. Now let's just start with this. Our draft class is estimated to cost about $19 million this year. Why? Well, because we have more than one premium pick. We have 2 firsts. First round picks are the most expensive. Not only are they 2 firsts, they're 2 top 10 firsts. Then we have 2 seconds as well. Not just 2 seconds, 2 top-end second-round picks. So these guys are going to be just about the most expensive guys that you can get in the draft. You know what I mean? So it's going to end up being about $19 million. As you know, we have a third-round pick, 2 fourths and 2 fifths as well. And that's without any potential movement up or back in the draft, of course. So let's get into this. What's my first move in free agency? Well, I think I'm going to start looking at the edge, and we are going to call, you'll know this name, we're going to call Anthony Barr from the Minnesota Vikings, and we're going to say, hey, we'd like you to come here. We're going to overpay you. We're going to give you $10 million a year for 3 years, guaranteed. How's that sound? He's going to go, oh, okay, well, I feels better going to the Jets now. You're in better hands. I think it's a good fit, blah, 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 blah. That's during the negotiating window. We're going to call him first thing and say $10 million for 3 years, all guaranteed. That's $30 million. And then about 4 hours before we can actually sign these guys, we're going to call his agent and we're going to say, we changed our mind. We just can't do it. We just can't do it. We're sorry, Anthony Barr. And then we're going to move on and get to some real players. How's that sound? Now, do you think Joe Douglas holds a grudge? No, of course he doesn't. That was done before he was even here. But he's listening. He's feeling the vibe from Jets fans. And this is what we call throwing the dog a bone. Thank you, Joe Douglas. I feel much better about the Anthony Barr situation. Thank you. So that's how we're going to start free agency, with little loving to the fan base. Take that. So the first guy we're going to go out there and grab day one of the negotiating period, we are going to call Laken Tomlinson, the guard from the San Francisco 49ers. I just made a video on this. I'll link it right here if you want to get into 3 potential guards that we can sign and fix that position in free agency. But we're going to go ahead and choose Laken Tomlinson as the guy that we want. We're going to give him a 3-year contract. Why Laken Tomlinson, you say? Because his comfort with the system, the offense, and the coaching staff cannot be undervalued. We're going to bring him in. He is going to hit the ground running. He already worked under LaFleur. He already worked under John Benton as his offensive line coach for years. It's going to be the smoothest possible transition to our offense, and we're going to fix that right guard spot. Lickety split, once and for all. We're sticking Laken Tomlinson in there. We are going to give him a $10 million contract, a real one this time. Laken Tomlinson fixes the right guard spot for us without any questions. So number 2 free agent, we're going to call this guy on day 1 of free agency 2. We're going to let him know, hey, we really wanted you last year, but you were franchise tagged and we couldn't do it. We want you to come and be a New York Jet. We want you to be wide receiver number 1. And we're going to call Allen Robinson from the Chicago Bears, and we're going to get it done. Now, the good news is he's coming off an off year. He also had a little bit of an injury. So we're not going to give him the $20 million that he has been rumored to be seeking last year. We're going to give him $14 million. And we're going to all be happy. It could even be incentive laden and all that sort of stuff. That's fine. We're going to grab Allen Robinson, wide receiver 1, to go along with Zach Wilson and his crew of misfits, Corey Davis, Elijah Moore. Don't forget, we re-signed Braxton Berrios. We're going to take care of tight ends this year for Zach Wilson too. So he's going to have a nice collection of lethal weapons, including Allen Robinson, the wide receiver. Now we're going to go ahead and transition to the defense. I was looking at cornerbacks. I was looking at safeties. The truth is I think it's paramount that we bring a vet defensive back into that positional group. We need it. We need it in the defensive back room. It is going to have more value than just on the field play. We need a vet in the room with the youngins, okay? So we're going to go ahead. We're going to try to get Marcus Williams. He wants 15. We try to offer him 12. He doesn't want it. So we're going to just transition quickly to Justin Reed, the safety from the Texans. And we're going to be able to get him for about $7-8 million at best. That's what we're going to do. So instead of paying 12 to Marcus Williams, we're going to get Justin Reed from the Texans, and we're going to save almost half of what we were going to pay Marcus Williams. So is it the optimal decision? Maybe not. I think Marcus Williams is the jewel of this safety class in free agency, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to be ecstatic to bring in Justin Reed from the Texans, and we're going to shore up that defensive back room because we're probably going to end up bringing in a rookie safety. I won't say who, but we're going to bring in a rookie safety. So we're going to need that vet to just, like I said, be the glue in the defensive back room under Tony Oden. Now, this is going to be an interesting one. We called Anthony Barr as a potential fill for the edge rusher position before we hit the draft. Well, now we're really going to focus on a guy that has been rumored to the Jets. I mean, since the draft, the 2015 draft, there were rumors that if he made it to the Jets would grab him. And that is Dante Fowler. We're actually going to get this guy. Now, he had a rich contract. He just finishes a 3-year, $45 million contract. So he did not live up to that contract. 3 years, $45 million, which is about $15 million a year. He only had 16 sacks over that 3-year period. He had a 4-sack year, an 8-sack year, and last year he had a 4.5 sack year. He did not start every game. I think he was available for 12 games or so. He started 6 games, and he had 4.5 sacks, 36 tackles, and 3 forced fumbles. So the guy is going to essentially be the Ronald Blair, the Vinnie Curry that we tried to bring in last year. But here's the interesting thing about Dante Fowler. Guess how old he is? Doesn't it feel like he's 32? Doesn't it? Dude, the guy's 27 years old. He's still considered young by NFL standards. He's 27 years old. I find that so difficult to swallow. But Dante Fowler, who has seemingly been rumored to the Jets for 21 years, he's only been in the league for 6. So interesting stuff. We're going to give him a 2-year contract averaging $6 million a year. He's going to love it. He wants to work under Saleh. He wants to play next to Quinnen Williams. All the stuff we hear. He's going to be psyched to come here. We finally have a regime that defensive guys will be proud to play for. Even though we were the 32nd ranked defense, they know the deal. They're going to talk to Saleh and they're going to love it. And he's going to rah-rah them and all that. So Dante Fowler and Justin Reed are coming over to take care of some holes on the defensive side of the ball. Now, here's an interesting signing that we're going to go out there and do. Now, maybe it's not this guy, but I think it very well could be. We're going to go out there and we're going to try to get a little bit of insurance for the tackle position. Not somebody to compete for the starting job, but in the event something happens, somebody goes down or whatever, a guy that you know can come in and play at an NFL level. You're going to recognize the name because he was our draft pick not even that long ago. We're going to go to the Seattle Seahawks and we're going to take Brandon Shell back. We're going to take Brandon Shell and we're going to plug him in as our reserve tackle. And I think that's going to be a fantastic move. Now, when I talked about bringing LDT back as well, then I went and signed Laken Tomlinson. So how does that work? Well, LDT is here to be that first off the bench guard. And now we have Brandon Shell, that first off the bench tackle. We can keep Chuma Edoga. He's under contract for 1 more year. So we got Edoga and Brandon Shell as the backup tackles. Both of them have tons of NFL experience. Brandon Shell more, of course. And then we have LDT with tons of NFL starting experience as well. Now that's what we're talking about for our reserve offensive line. We got Becton, we got AVT, we got Connor McGovern, we have Laken Tomlinson, we have George Fant, and then behind them we have Lawrence Duvernay-Tardif and Brandon Shell. Now that is a good depth situation. Now the first thing you're going to be thinking is, Bean, that sounds like you might be spending more than the $50 million. Well, maybe I am. Maybe I am spending a little bit more than we have allotted. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, we already know that the salary cap is going to be up, rumored to be as high as $30 million next year. So the trick is to bring these guys in, front load the contract with some signing bonus stuff, limit the actual per year portion of the contract. You can get a guy like Laken Tomlinson. You give him a nice big signing bonus, spread it out, push a lot of the money to the second year of his contract, and then you get him for a salary of $6 million instead of the $10 million. You do the same thing with Allen Robinson, signing bonuses and pushing the contract a little bit till next year when we already know we're going to get an influx of $30 million or so, and we take care of it then. It's smart to lock these guys up right now before we have to pay them. You can get that all done. You can be creative. Now, I'm never going to pretend that I'm a numbers guy. Just not my gig, man. But there is a certain level of knowledge I have, and we can take some of this stuff and you can be creative and push some of the responsibility to a year or two down the road. So what does our free agent class look like? We look like this. Justin Reed at safety, Dante Fowler at edge, Allen Robinson at wide receiver, Laken Tomlinson at guard, and Brandon Shell at tackle. That leaves us about, maybe if everything goes right, we'll probably have somewhere between $5 and $10 million left over after all of our own free agents, all of our rookie class, and all of these free agents. Now you're going to say, well, what happened to Dalton Schultz? What happened to him? Well, the truth is we can't get him. Why? Because he wants $15 million and he wants to play for the Kansas City Chiefs or the 49ers or the Bengals, and we weren't able to get him. I looked at it. I want Dalton Schultz. I think he's going to be great. Wherever he goes, I think they're going to be getting a gem, but we couldn't get him. And what the Jets intend to do is we're going to go to the draft. We're going to draft 2 tight ends, and we're going to have a young stable. We're going to have a 2nd-round pick in someone like McBride. We're going to have a 4th-round pick with someone like Ferguson or Dulich, one of those guys. And then we have our 2nd-year tight end coming back in Kenny Yeboah, and it's going to be fine. It's going to be perfect. We do not need the vet tight end. We just watched years with vet tight ends that could do nothing. So while I want Dalton Schultz, I don't think it's in the cards for us. So we were able to add Allen Robinson and bring Berrios back for Zach Wilson. And now we have 9 draft picks to be able to grab another wide receiver in the mids, and we can grab a tight end or 2, and we're going to be fine. Now, what does this do for the draft? We're not going to get into the draft picks in this video, but we are going to go ahead and talk about how this free agent class can benefit the New York Jets draft in 2022. What does it do? Well, when you bring in a starting caliber guard and keep a starting caliber guard as the reserve, what that does is it takes this madness, this fear-based method of feeling like we need to draft a tackle at 4 overall. Now, what are the reasons that we want to draft a tackle at 4 overall? Let's say if it's Evan Neal, if it's Ekwonu, if it's Cross, anybody, whatever your flavor of the day is, we're talking about bringing in a tackle for basically 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is we're concerned about how well Mekhi Becton can come back from this injury. We're scared. We're nervous. We're afraid. We heard rumors that he's eaten too much. We've heard rumors that he's fat and he can't heal because he's so fat and he's been laying around. All this stuff that's coming out. Don't forget, we do have conflicting reports from his trainer and all that. We've seen videos of him. He doesn't look extra fat. He doesn't look like a guy who's eaten himself to death, as was reported. But we're hearing this stuff and we can't help but be nervous. So we want to bring in a tackle as insurance. I'm going to tell you something. Using the 4th overall pick as insurance for a team like where we are in our building process, that's not the proper way to use the 4th overall pick as an insurance policy. So if everything works out, now you have an extra tackle floating around and holes all over the place. So, but then people say, well, that's fine. Ekwonu, Neal, these guys can play guard. So now we're saying we want to use the 4th overall pick on a tackle converting to guard. That also doesn't necessarily make a bunch of sense. Now, can it be done? Sure. And if they really are concerned about Becton, sure, absolutely. But you can take care of insurance for the tackle position and even guard if you want them to be versatile, that's fine. You can take care of that in the 3rd and 4th round without any issue. So now we have Brandon Shell as the backup swing tackle. We also have Chuma Edoga backing up 2 starting caliber, potentially excellent caliber tackles on our team. We have them under contract for this year. There's no reason to panic and go and use the 4th overall pick on an insurance policy or a tackle that we want to convert to guard. Is it helpful? Sure. It's fine. But when we bring in Lake and Tomlinson, we re-sign LDT, and we bring in a guy like Brandon Shell as the backup, we don't have to think that way anymore. So now it takes some of the heat off of that 4th overall pick, and now you can look at the positions that you really need that don't have anybody under contract. We don't have any linebackers. We don't have a legitimate edge rusher. We just brought in Dante Fowler. We have Carl Lawson. He's a big question mark. He's arguably a bigger question mark than Becton. I mean, Carl Lawson's had numerous injuries, and this was a pretty big one. We lost him for the year too. So arguably, he's a bigger question mark than Mekhi Becton. I find it interesting that we're all freaking out over Becton's first real injury, and yet we're putting all this hope and faith in Carl Lawson. It doesn't compute. We should have at least the same level of concern for Carl Lawson that we do for Mekhi Becton. So I think that if you go ahead and bolster the offensive line in free agency like I just did, it takes some of the heat off what you need to do with that 4th round pick, and you can actually plug a hole that doesn't have anybody under contract. Dante Fowler will be great. He'll be a rotational piece, situational, maybe 30% of the snaps this year, come in, get his 8 sacks from that position, well rested, go ahead, come in hot. That's fine. And then we use the 4th overall pick on the best edge rusher that's on the board. If it's Thibodeau, great. If you like Karlaftis more, fantastic. If the miracle happens and Aiden Hutchinson happens to slip through because the 3 teams picking before us are moronic and they pick quarterbacks or whatever it is, then you grab him. Whoever your favorite edge rusher is that's on the board, you bring him in and you plug him into that hole that's on the team that we have nobody there. And now you got Carl Lawson and edge rusher from the draft backed up by Fowler. See what I'm saying? And Bryce Huff. Now you got guys in their right positions, and we already have 2 tackles. So that's one thing that it does. What else does it do? It also takes away, by bringing in Allen Robinson, it takes away the feeling that we need to use the 10 overall pick on a wide receiver. Look, the truth is while this wide receiver class is considered kind of deep, it's not considered a very strong wide receiver class. Like, for example, there are rumors going around that the Jets could be involved in a 3-way trade, and Denver might be one of the teams. So we've discussed Jerry Jeudy as a potential option in that trade for the Jets. Jerry Jeudy would hands down be the best wide receiver in this class, without question. Without question, Jerry Jeudy would be wide receiver number 1. The guy who would be wide receiver number 1 in this class is injured, and he's probably not going to be wide receiver number 1. So this relatively weak wide receiver class took a major hit when Jameson Williams got injured toward the end of the season. So feeling like you need to use the 10 overall pick on a wide receiver, which I understand the feeling that we need to, is not really the smartest way to do it unless you think that this wide receiver is worthy of the number 10 overall pick. Where would they have been picked last year? Would they have been taken before Devontae Adams? Is he as good as Jamar Chase? If they're not, then we don't want to use a top 10 pick on him. You can get that caliber guy in the 2nd round, maybe even the 3rd round. And when you laugh at that, don't forget DK Metcalf slipped to the bottom of the 2nd. Terry McLaurin was a 3rd round pick. Michael Thomas was a 2nd round pick. It goes on and on and on, man. Michael Pittman was a 2nd round pick. T. Higgins, all sorts of guys are 2nd and 3rd round picks that have amazing potential in the NFL. So the feeling that we need to draft for need, which is, in my opinion, exactly what we're doing when we're talking about drafting an offensive tackle and a wide receiver at 4 and 10. If you have a free agent class like I just outlined for you, then you no longer need to talk about that. And you can actually plug some legitimate holes like tight end at 4. What do you think of that? We're not taking a tight end at 4, but you can get your edge rusher. You can get your safety. You can get Sauce Gardner at 10, most likely. You can get that number 1 style cornerback. Don't forget, we don't have one. There's a lot to support that Saleh doesn't feel like he needs a cornerback number 1. We got Eccles, we got Hall, we got Michael Carter, and they're going to be fine once we get that edge situation going on. And that's fine. But depending on the way that you want to do it, you're going to be able to get a top-tier cornerback at 10, a top-tier safety at 10. You might even be able to get Kyle Hamilton at 10. So think about this, guys. While I know some people don't want to take a safety with 10, and I understand and respect that completely, if we go ahead and we plug the wide receiver hole and we plug the right guard hole and even give the offensive line depth behind tackle and behind the guards, now we can get an edge and a cornerback or a Kyle Hamilton, and you don't have to bat an eyelash at the idea of doing that. Now we've just plugged 4 holes instead of the 2 that we're drafting for need when you talk about a tackle and a wide receiver at 4 and 10. So this is the type of free agent class that we can have. These are the guys that I think we should get. Laken Tomlinson, Justin Reed, Allen Robinson, Brandon Shell, or the like as a backup, and an edge rusher like Dante Fowler, who's still amazingly only 27 years old. We know he can play in the NFL. We know that he has the capability of having a nice impact on the game. Bring him in as the rotational piece. Take care of the Vinny Curry role that we needed last year. Now we got Carl Lawson, Dante Fowler, Kayvon Thibodeau, Bryce Huff. That's alongside of JFM and Quinnen Williams. Now we're talking. So let me know what you think, guys. I know a lot of you aren't going to agree with me, but let's talk about this logically. Let's try to have a logical discussion. You don't have to call me ugly. You don't have to call me fat and old. You don't have to do that to have a discussion with me. Let's just talk about the players that I selected and maybe some ideas that you have. I'm very curious to see where this conversation goes. And with that all said, I want to remind you about how you can support the channel. We have this Wednesday night on my Patreon. We are watching together in a private Zoom room. So with all that said, I want to remind you before I go how you can help support the channel. The best way to do it and keep me out here doing this stuff, making all these videos and all this content for you, is to subscribe to my Patreon. The link is right in the top of the description of this very video. And guys, just so you know what you're going to get for the Patreon, this Wednesday, all tiers, we get to watch the classic rewind of former Jets games. This week, together in a private little room, we are going to relive the 1998 Jets home playoff game against the Jaguars, where Keyshawn Johnson had 2 touchdowns, a fumble recovery, and an interception. How does it happen? We're going to relive it and find out how this Wednesday night on my Patreon. If you get in now, you'll be able to jump in that room with us. And there's all sorts of other benefits. The tiers are on my Patreon. Click the link. You can take a look at all of it, and I greatly appreciate it. For anybody else, just go ahead and like and subscribe to the video. It changes everything for me, and I can keep this going. And I want to thank you guys. I want to thank you for all the amazing support that you give me. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you next time. Go Jets.